Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're
No.
going back in time. We're opening up, this 1968 Israeli government yearbook, and it's devoted to the Six-Day War.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so told from, one perspective,
Right.
but we're going to try to unpack how they wanted the world to see this conflict, like just a year after it happened.
Hmm.
Think of it kind of like their version of events, but with global stakes.
Yeah, what's interesting is you look at this yearbook, it's not just like a dry recounting of battles and dates.
Hmm.
They're really trying to craft a narrative.
Oh, totally.
And the narrative is basically, they're the heroes
Right.
facing down like 20 years of what they call Arab aggression.
Yeah.
So, border raids, blockades, the Egyptians closing the Straits of Tiran, the expulsion of the UN emergency force. It's all in there, really trying to paint this picture of being under constant threat.
So like setting the stage, right? It's not,
Absolutely.
this didn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly.
But they also, they spend a lot of time in this yearbook talking about diplomacy, right? They're reaching out to world powers, sending warnings, trying to find a peaceful solution.
Right. Like they're going to great lengths to show that we didn't want this war.
Right.
They were forced into it.
Hmm.
But it also raises the question, were these genuine attempts at peace?
Hmm.
Or were they already gearing up for battle and just wanted to make sure that they had international sympathy on their side?
Phew. Like getting their alibi ready.
Right, exactly.
But then the war explodes, and they really don't hold back on the victory lap in this yearbook.
Yeah.
It's all about speed, decisiveness, the strength of the Israeli people, their military genius.
Well, and from a purely military standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
it was a remarkable victory. I mean, think about it. They took out the Egyptian Air Force in the first few hours of the war,
Wow.
gained complete control of the skies. That alone just shifted the balance of power dramatically. And then, their ground forces just swept through Sinai, Gaza,
Yeah.
the West Bank, even the Golan Heights.
Yeah.
All in 6 days.
Mm-hmm.
It's no wonder they're showcasing this.
But okay, winning is one thing. What about the aftermath?
Right.
The yearbook talks about, taking control of these territories, claiming that they were fair, kept things orderly.
Yeah.
Even mentions like helping refugees, get back.
Mhm.
It all sounds pretty neat and tidy.
Well, that's the story they're trying to sell, right?
Yeah.
But the reality of administering those territories, especially the West Bank and Gaza, is far, far messier.
Sure.
I mean, you have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are displaced,
Yeah.
creating a refugee crisis that still has repercussions today.
Right.
And for those who remained, it wasn't just about rebuilding.
Mm.
It was about living under military occupation. And that's a whole other layer of complexity that this yearbook just kind of glosses over.
Right, because they really focus on this idea of bringing normalcy back.
Yeah.
Especially in Jerusalem, integrating city services, protecting holy sites for all faiths. Like, look, we're making things better.
Right. And the reunification of Jerusalem was a huge deal,
Yeah.
both practically and symbolically.
Yeah.
But the way they present it in this yearbook is fascinating.
Yeah.
They're really playing up their role as these protectors of religious freedom,
Right.
trying to appease those international concerns.
Mm.
What they don't dwell on is the outrage from much of the international community, the UN resolutions condemning their actions.
Mm.
Clearly, not everyone bought their version of events.
Right. And they, of course, can't ignore the fact that things were not exactly peaceful after the war.
Right.
They talk about Arab resistance, economic warfare, boycotts, terrorism from groups like El Fatah. It's like, we won the war, but the fight's not over.
Exactly. They're painting themselves as victims of this continued aggression,
Yes.
trying to justify their ongoing control.
Hmm.
But, think about it from the Palestinian perspective.
Right.
Their land is occupied, their lives are disrupted. It's no surprise that there's resistance. Whether you call that terrorism or a fight for freedom really just depends on whose story you're listening to.
And that's the thing. This yearbook is just one side of a very, very complicated story.
Absolutely.
And we're only in part one of our deep dives.
Right.
Already we're seeing how much is left out
Yeah.
and, how carefully they're crafting this narrative.
The masterclass in space.
Yeah. And we're going to dig even deeper into how they portray the Palestinian people, the challenges of governing these occupied territories, and, really the long-lasting impact of this 6-day war.
Right.
So Stay tuned because this is just the beginning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we left off with this image of Israel kind of taking control, trying to, they say make things better in these new territories.
Right.
But let's zoom in on the West Bank and Gaza because they go into a lot of detail about what they were doing there.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they frame it.
Hmm.
They talk about a return to normalcy, local authorities getting back to work, essential services being restored,
Right.
even jump-starting the economy. It's almost like they're trying to convince themselves,
Yeah.
as much as anyone else, that everything's going smoothly.
Yeah, they even they brag about these infrastructure projects connecting Gaza to their railway system, extending the phone system.
Right.
It's like, look how much we're investing. We're modernizing these places, but it feels a little bit like putting lipstick on a pig, you know?
Yeah, exactly. They're highlighting the economic benefits. Boosting tourism, promoting exports, creating jobs.
Right.
But they conveniently leave out the fact that all of this is happening under military occupation.
Right.
Palestinians couldn't just go about their lives freely.
Yeah.
Their movements were restricted, their resources were limited. It's a very selective picture of progress.
And they do say there were challenges, particularly with finding the money to kind of keep these economies afloat. Tourism had been a big deal in the West Bank before the war, and they admit they need to kind of lure people back. Again, it's all about how they frame it.
Absolutely. And they talk about, Arab resistance.
Yeah.
It's this annoying obstacle, blaming it on media incitement and groups like the PLO.
Yeah.
It's never presented as a legitimate response to occupation, just a nuisance to be dealt with.
Right, right.
Which, of course, reinforces their narrative that they're the ones bringing stability and security.
Okay, but they also talk about humanitarian aid.
Right.
Providing food, keeping hospitals and schools running, working with groups like UNRWA. Are they just trying to look good for the international community, or was there a genuine effort to help people?
It's probably a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt that people were suffering, especially the refugees. So providing aid serves a very practical purpose, but it also allows them to project this image of compassion and responsibility. So, yeah, strategic humanitarianism, if you will.
Right, because image is everything on the world stage.
It is.
And speaking of which, they spend a lot of time in this yearbook talking about their international relations, particularly the support they got from certain countries, especially the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. really emerges as this crucial ally.
Right.
Almost a lifeline.
Yeah.
The yearbook praises their understanding of Israel's security concerns. Their diplomatic efforts to prevent the conflict from escalating.
Right.
They even quote President Johnson calling for a lasting peace based on secure borders for all states. So they're saying, see, even the superpower has our back.
And it wasn't just the government, right? They also highlight the sympathy and support they got from the American public.
Right.
Especially the Jewish community. I mean, that must have been a huge boost, both, financially and morally.
Absolutely. It underscores the importance of that U.S.-Israel relationship, a relationship that only became stronger after the Six-Day War.
Yeah.
It also shows the vital role that these diaspora communities play in supporting Israel on this global stage.
But it wasn't all, sunshine and roses internationally, right? I mean, they're clearly disappointed with France's stance, even though they had been close allies before the war.
Yeah. France's decision to impose an arms embargo was a big blow.
Yeah.
I mean, they had been a major supplier of military equipment to Israel.
Right.
So this felt like a betrayal. And then, President de Gaulle's criticism of Israel's actions during the war really created this rift that took a long time to heal.
They also talk about their dealings with the European Economic Community, trying to, get closer economically beyond just having a basic trade agreement. What was the motivation there?
It's all about survival, right? I mean, they needed to boost their economy. And the EEC represented this huge potential market.
Right.
They wanted access to investment, to trade opportunities.
Yeah.
A way to overcome these challenges they were facing after the war.
And of course, they can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is the Soviet Union.
Right.
I mean, the yearbook is full of criticism of their unwavering support for the Arab states,
Mhm.
accusing them of fueling the conflict with weapons and diplomatic cover at the UN.
Yeah, I mean, it's Cold War politics in
Yeah,
full swing.
yeah.
The Soviet Union saw, the Arab states as these allies in
Right.
their struggle against the West.
Hmm.
They provided them with, military and economic aid,
Yeah.
and their veto power at the UN was a constant thorn in Israel's side.
Mm. Yeah.
It really was a classic proxy war
Yeah.
with both superpowers vying for influence in the region.
But amidst all this tension, they have surprisingly good things to say about Romania. They maintain these diplomatic ties despite pressure from Moscow,
Yeah.
which seems, kind of bold at the time.
Well, Romania was a bit of a maverick within the Soviet bloc,
Yeah.
They were willing to chart their own course,
Hmm.
balancing their relationship with Moscow while also engaging with countries like Israel.
Yeah.
This allowed for some, economic and cultural exchanges.
Yeah.
It's like this rare bright spot in a very polarized world.
So even with, the Cold War looming large, they were
Yeah.
trying to build bridges elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The yearbook mentions their efforts to connect with countries in Africa and Asia,
Right.
recognizing that, some supported the Arab states. But there was also like a growing admiration for Israel's achievement, especially in development.
Yeah, and this outreach to the developing world was strategic.
Hmm.
They saw an opportunity to share their expertise in agriculture, technology, infrastructure.
Yeah.
It was a way to build goodwill.
Yeah.
Maybe even find new allies
Right.
who weren't caught up in this Cold War divide.
It's fascinating how they're trying to present this like multifaceted picture of their place in the world. They acknowledge the diplomatic hurdles, but they end on this hopeful note,
Right.
emphasizing their commitment to peace
Mhm.
and their willingness to work with anyone who respects their right to exist. But it's all very carefully crafted, right?
Of course.
It's the story they want to tell.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
a masterclass in spin.
Yeah.
And in the next part, we'll kind of step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
What does this yearbook really tell us about their self-perception, their anxieties,
Yeah.
their aspirations
Yeah.
after this 6-day war?
So stay tuned because there's a lot more to unpack.
Absolutely.
So we've spent like 2 parts now really getting into this yearbook,
Yeah.
seeing the 6-day war and everything that came after from like the Israeli government's point of view. But now I kind of want to know, like, what's the takeaway? What does this document actually tell us?
Well, it's like we've been, peeling back layers of an onion, right?
Yeah.
We started with their narrative of victory,
Right.
this incredible military achievement.
Yeah.
But then we saw how they, use that victory to justify taking control of these new territories
Mm-hmm.
and how they try to manage those territories, all while facing, resistance and navigating this complex international landscape.
Right.
It's a story of power, but also of insecurity,
Yeah.
of trying to solidify their position in a region that was and still is incredibly volatile.
And they're very aware of their audience with this yearbook, right? This wasn't just for, Israelis to read. This was
Correct.
meant for the world.
It was meant for the world.
They're trying to like shape international opinion,
Yeah,
build alliances, and ultimately like secure their future.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So after spending all this time with this yearbook, what surprised you the most? Was there anything that like made you kind of rethink your own understanding of the 6-day war?
I was struck by how much emphasis they put on economic warfare.
Mm-hmm.
The Arab boycott,
Yeah.
the attempts to isolate Israel economically.
Yeah.
It's a whole dimension of the conflict that I think often gets overshadowed
Right.
by the military and political narratives.
Yeah.
But it's really important, I think. It shows how interconnected these things are.
Yeah.
How a war fought over land and resources can have these ripple effects
Yeah.
on a global scale.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about the economic side of things.
It is.
But it's crucial for like understanding the motivations, and the long-term consequences. And it kind of makes you wonder, did they succeed? Did they succeed in their PR campaign?
Right.
Did the world buy their version of the story?
Well, that's a complex question.
Yeah.
Um, They certainly gained some support, especially as we've talked about from the U.S.
Right.
But they also alienated others,
Yeah.
like France, and faced continued opposition from the Soviet Union and many Arab states.
Right.
The Six-Day War was a turning point, but it didn't solve anything.
Right.
It just created a new set of challenges and really cemented the divisions that continue to fuel conflict in the region today.
And this yearbook, with all of its, carefully crafted narratives and things that they leave out, it reminds us that history is always written from a certain perspective, right?
Absolutely.
It's up to us to dig deeper, to consider different viewpoints, and to really try to understand like the complexities of a conflict that still affects the lives of millions of people. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your final thought for our listeners today?
I want to leave you with this, the Six-Day War, despite its name, wasn't just a six-day event, right? Its legacy continues.
Yeah.
It reverberates through the decades, impacting everything from international relations to the daily lives of Israelis and Palestinians. This yearbook offers, I think, a glimpse into one side of a very multifaceted story,
right?
A story that's still being written.
Yeah. So as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, to seek out those different perspectives.
Absolutely.
And to engage with these complexities of history, because the more we understand the past, the better equipped we are to deal with the present and hopefully shape a more peaceful future.
I agree.
Until next time.